Dwayne Johnson, one of America's most beloved actors, experienced an extraordinary and unforgettable moment during what seemed to be a routine dinner at a restaurant. What began as an ordinary evening quickly escalated into an astonishing turn of events, leaving everyone present in awe of the unexpected outcome. Let us know where you're watching from. If you admire the righteous characters in this story, give us a thumbs up and subscribe now. On a late winter afternoon, the warmth of Christmas seemed to wrap itself around every corner. From the glittering lights on street lamps to the soft hum of carolers in the distance, the air was crisp, carrying the faint aroma of pine and cinnamon, blending with the joyous laughter of families strolling by. Among the festive scenes, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, a man admired not only for his larger-than-life persona, but also his kind heart, strolled down the bustling street, clad in a dark coat that complemented his towering frame. He exuded a sense of quiet confidence. His signature smile drew glances and whispers from passers-by, but he moved with purpose, scanning the storefronts until his eyes landed on a cozy restaurant with warm, golden light spilling through its windows. Inside, the atmosphere was inviting. The soft glow of candles on every table danced to the sound of soft jazz playing in the background. The scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the rich aroma of hearty dishes, making the choice irresistible. With a deep breath, The Rock stepped inside, nodding politely to the hostess as he prepared to enjoy a rare moment of calm amidst the holiday bustle. Dwayne made his choice, deciding that this restaurant would be his destination for the evening. However, his outfit immediately set him apart in the lavish surroundings. Dressed in a simple gray hoodie and black athletic joggers, paired with white sneakers, his attire radiated comfort and casualness, a stark contrast to the elegance of the space. The brilliance of the chandeliers cast a golden glow over the room, reflecting off the polished marble floors and highlighting the contrast between his relaxed ensemble and the formal attire of other diners. Guests adorned in evening gowns and tailored suits glanced his way, some with subtle curiosity, others with mild surprise, as his laid-back demeanor seemed almost out of place amidst the restaurant's refined atmosphere. Despite the disparity, Dwayne's calm confidence remained unshaken. He smiled warmly at the hostess, unfazed by the opulence around him. Almost instantly, Mary appeared, her server uniform crisp and perfectly fitted as she stepped forward with practiced precision. Her lips curved into a polite but tight smile, the kind that barely masked the flicker of disdain in her eyes. After 7 years at this elite establishment, Mary had honed the ability to assess diners with a single glance, and the man before her, clad in a gray hoodie and athletic joggers, clearly did not belong. Her gaze quickly swept over him, taking in the casual outfit, the sneakers that seemed out of place against the polished marble floors, and the effortless confidence with which he stood there. To her, this man represented everything at odds with the restaurant's exclusivity, its carefully cultivated image of refined luxury. "How may I assist you?" Mary asked, her tone carrying a slight edge of stiffness. Though her words were polite, her sharp gaze scanned him briefly, lingering on his hoodie and joggers, as though questioning the purpose of his visit. "I'd like a table for tonight," Dwayne replied calmly, his voice soft yet assured, completely unfazed by her demeanor. "Do you have a reservation?" Mary continued, her tone subtly laced with an undertone that seemed to ask whether he even had the status to make a reservation at such a place. Her words were precise, but the faint lift of her brow betrayed her thoughts. Dwayne smiled slightly, sensing the judgment beneath her polished exterior but choosing not to respond to it. His calm presence contrasted starkly with her guarded professionalism, creating a quiet tension between the two. The moment hung in the air, her rigid posture standing against his relaxed composure, as he waited patiently for her response. "I haven't," Dwayne replied casually, his voice steady and unbothered. "But judging by tonight's crowd, I believe I could get a table." Mary's lips tightened ever so slightly, and her eyes briefly darted toward the dining room, where well-dressed patrons filled most of the tables, chatting softly under the golden glow of the chandeliers. "Then follow me," Mary said, her tone neutral but with a faint trace of detachment. Without waiting for a reply, she turned on her heel and began walking, her polished shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. Dwayne followed, his broad frame standing out amidst the refined ambience of the restaurant. The chandeliers above cast a golden glow, illuminating the elegant tables where well-dressed patrons sipped wine and dined on artfully plated dishes. Mary's pace was brisk, her posture upright as she led him down a less conspicuous path. Away from the central dining area, they weaved past neatly arranged tables, their linen-clad surfaces adorned with flickering candles and floral centerpieces, and into a quieter corner of the restaurant. Finally, Mary stopped at a small table tucked away near the restrooms. The space was far from the grandeur of the main dining area. The constant movement of guests coming and going added a sense of unease to the already awkward placement. "This is all we have left," she said. Her words clipped as she gestured toward the table. Her expression remained polite but cold, as though silently emphasizing that this was the best someone like him could hope for. Dwayne glanced around the area, noting the steady stream of patrons passing by and the faint hum of restroom doors opening and closing. For a moment, he stood there in silence, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly in an amused smile. He wasn't oblivious to the subtle indignity of the situation, but his demeanor remained composed, his relaxed confidence unwavering. "Perfect," he said finally, his voice calm and steady as he took a seat, making no effort to challenge Mary's clear judgment. The table might not have been ideal, but it seemed Dwayne had decided it wasn't worth ruining the evening over. Mary's thoughts lingered as she watched him settle into the seat without complaint, his calm demeanor almost irritating. "Perfect," she echoed silently in her mind, her lips tightening into the faintest smirk. "Yes, it's perfect for someone like him," she thought, her judgment sharper than ever. The placement of the table couldn't have been more deliberate, nestled awkwardly near the restrooms, with guests constantly passing by and breaking any illusion of tranquility. It was the least desirable spot in the entire restaurant. For Mary, it was fitting for someone who had arrived without a reservation, dressed in attire far removed from the elegance of the room. Mary turned sharply on her heel, heading toward the counter to retrieve a menu, her polished steps purposeful yet laced with disdain. Her thoughts swirled with quiet contempt as she walked away, her lips pressing into a tight line. "He'll be gone soon enough," she thought with a faint scoff, the corners of her mouth curling ever so slightly in satisfaction. A man like him, dressed like that, probably scraping by, doesn't belong here. Let's see how long it takes him to figure it out. The restaurant was a sanctuary of luxury, a place where refinement wasn't just expected, it was required. Every detail, from the glimmering chandeliers to the hand-stitched leather chairs, spoke of exclusivity. To Mary, it was laughable that someone who didn't even bother to make a reservation would think they could step into this world, much less stay. "The menu will do the talking," she thought with a bitter amusement, picturing his reaction when he saw the prices printed elegantly on the page. One glance, and he'll realize exactly where he is and where he doesn't belong. He'll tuck his tail and leave before embarrassing himself any further. As she approached the counter, she glanced back briefly, her sharp eyes observing him as he sat at the table. He seemed relaxed, his large frame almost out of place in the cozy corner. Yet his calm composure irked her. It was as though he didn't care about the judgment she was silently throwing his way, and that, in itself, was irritating. With the menu in hand, she took a breath, ready to deliver the unspoken reality of this place. In her mind, it wasn't just a meal he was about to face, it was a reminder of his place in the world. "Let's see how long that confidence lasts," she muttered under her breath. Striding back toward the table, Mary placed the menu on the table with a practiced motion, stepping back just enough to give him space while silently reveling in the moment she had been waiting for. "This is it," she thought smugly. He'll take one look at the prices and realize he's made a mistake. Maybe he'll stumble over an excuse and leave quietly, sparing himself the embarrassment. But as he opened the menu, her anticipation faltered. Dwayne's expression remained calm, unbothered, as his eyes skimmed the elegant script detailing the restaurant's most exquisite dishes. Her confidence wavered for a moment when he looked up and, without hesitation, said, "I'll have the house special." Mary's brow twitched, the faintest crack in her polished demeanor. The house special? She thought incredulously. Does he even know what that is? The signature dish wasn't just food, it was an event. A multi-course experience designed for elite clientele who understood both the artistry and the expense of such a meal. It was the crown jewel of the menu, a dish that separated the connoisseurs from the pretenders. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice tinged with an unmistakable hint of skepticism. Though she tried to mask it as politeness, her eyes narrowed slightly as she searched his face for a sign of hesitation, a clue that he was bluffing. "Yes," Dwayne said simply, his tone unwavering. He closed the menu with a calm certainty that grated against her expectations. "And bring me a glass of your finest red wine to pair with it." Mary clenched her jaw, biting back a retort. Finest red wine? She thought bitterly, her disdain simmering just beneath her composed exterior. Does he even know what that costs? Or is he just pretending he belongs here? Without a word, she nodded curtly and turned on her heel, her thoughts swirling with quiet contempt. Fine, she thought. Let him dig his own hole. When the bill comes, we'll see how long that confidence lasts. Dwayne sat patiently at his table, his demeanor calm and composed, seemingly unaffected by the table's awkward placement near the constant foot traffic. As he waited for his order, his gaze casually drifted around the room, taking in the soft hum of conversations and the clinking of fine china. Suddenly, a man staggered by, his steps unsteady and his breath faintly laced with the unmistakable scent of alcohol. He stumbled slightly, his foot catching against Dwayne's outstretched leg, causing a brief jolt. "Hey, watch it, man," Dwayne said evenly, his tone calm but firm, glancing up at the man. The man, dressed in an expensive suit and reeking of entitlement, stopped abruptly. He turned, glaring down at Dwayne with a sneer, his tone sharp and dripping with prejudice. "What's wrong with you? Blind or something? Oh wait, of course. A black guy like you probably doesn't even have eyes. Huh." The room seemed to still for a moment, the man's venomous words hanging in the air like an uninvited guest. A few heads turned, some diners whispering to one another, while others pretended not to notice the unfolding tension. Dwayne's face remained calm, his expression unreadable. He took a slow breath, his broad shoulders steady as he looked up at the man, locking eyes with him. For a moment, it was as if the entire restaurant was waiting for his reaction, the silence buzzing with anticipation. Mary rushed over almost immediately, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor as she seized the moment. Her face, which had been carefully composed all evening, now betrayed a simmering disdain she seemed to have been holding back. Standing next to the unsteady man, who appeared emboldened by her presence, she crossed her arms and looked down at Dwayne with a mix of condescension and frustration. "Exactly," she said, her voice carrying a sharp edge that cut through the quiet murmur of the dining room. "A black man like you, what are you? Really? To think you belong here? Let's be clear," she continued, her tone rising slightly. "The only reason you're sitting at that table right now is because I'm a professional and followed the rules. Otherwise, someone like you would never step foot in a place like this." Her words hung in the air, sharp and cutting, echoing in the ears of everyone who had stopped to watch the scene unfold. A few diners exchanged uneasy glances, while others simply stared, their curiosity tinged with disbelief. The tension in the room was palpable, as though the entire restaurant itself recoiled at the hostility in her voice. Dwayne sat silently for a moment, his calm exterior unbroken, though his sharp gaze locked onto Mary. His relaxed posture didn't shift, but the weight of his presence filled the air, his silence speaking louder than any immediate response. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting to see how he would answer. Dwayne remained calm, his steady demeanor unshaken by the venom in their words. He looked directly at Mary, his voice calm but firm, carrying a quiet authority. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect," he said evenly, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. "It doesn't matter who they are or where they come from. Decency costs nothing." But James, the drunken man, wasn't finished. Emboldened by his anger and Mary's thinly veiled support, he sneered at Dwayne, swaying slightly as he leaned closer. "Respect? You don't deserve a shred of it." James spat, his voice rising. "You're nothing but a joke. Stupid. Low-class trash. People like you," he paused, gesturing dismissively at Dwayne, "aren't even worth the dirt under my shoes. You should be thankful to even breathe the same air as me, let alone sit here." The words were harsh, dripping with arrogance and hatred. A few diners gasped audibly, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to react. The soft hum of the restaurant had gone completely silent, replaced by an almost oppressive tension. All eyes were on Dwayne now, waiting to see how he would respond to the blatant provocation. Dwayne sat back slightly, his expression unreadable, his broad shoulders relaxed as though the insults hadn't pierced him in the slightest. Yet, there was a weight in his silence, a quiet strength that made it clear he was not a man easily shaken. Mary, emboldened by James's outburst and her own simmering prejudices, finally let her mask of professionalism slip entirely. Her voice, sharp and venomous, rang out across the room, leaving no doubt about her true thoughts. "Oh, that's exactly right," she snapped, her tone dripping with contempt. "People like you don't deserve respect. Respect is something earned. And let me tell you, it's us, white people, who deserve it, not someone like you." She scoffed, her lip curling in disgust as she continued, louder now, as though trying to humiliate him further. "Filthy, disgusting," she spat, her words cutting through the stunned silence of the restaurant. "You don't belong here. You're a stain on this place, and you should get out right now." The room seemed to freeze, her hateful words hanging in the air like a dark cloud. Guests sat motionless, some staring wide-eyed at the spectacle, others casting their eyes downward, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Even James, swaying unsteadily next to her, seemed momentarily taken aback by her unrestrained hostility. Dwayne, however, didn't flinch. His calm gaze remained fixed on her, his expression unreadable. The insults, the hatred, they seemed to bounce off him as though they held no power over him. Instead, he sat there, still and composed, exuding a quiet dignity that only made Mary's venom seem smaller and more pathetic in comparison. James, his drunken swagger turning into aggressive determination, staggered forward toward Dwayne, his face twisted in a mix of fury and misplaced pride. "You think you're better than me, huh?" he barked, his voice loud and slurred, drawing even more attention from the surrounding diners, sitting there all quiet. "Like you're above this, like you're above me. Is that it?" His steps were uneven but purposeful, his clenched fists betraying his intent. He leaned closer, jabbing a finger toward Dwayne's chest, his sneer growing darker. "Answer me, you filthy piece of trash. You're nothing. Nothing. You think you can just sit there and ignore me? Like I'm not worth your time? I'll show you exactly what I'm worth." Dwayne remained seated, his broad shoulders relaxed and his expression calm. He didn't rise to the bait, didn't flinch as James got closer, the hostility practically radiating off him. Instead, he slowly looked up, meeting James's gaze with an unshakable steadiness that seemed to drain some of the man's drunken bravado. The tension in the room was thick, the diners frozen in their seats, their eyes darting between the two men. Some whispered in hushed tones, others sat wide-eyed, waiting to see what would happen next. Even Mary, standing off to the side, seemed momentarily unsure of how to react, her earlier venom replaced with a flicker of uncertainty. And yet, through it all, Dwayne didn't move. His silence wasn't avoidance, it was control, a quiet strength that seemed to say more than any words could. Mary, consumed by her rage, stormed toward Dwayne, her foot lifting with reckless intent to kick him where he sat. Her actions were wild, driven by pure venom, as if she believed this final humiliation would force him out. The room seemed to freeze as the diners watched in stunned silence, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Before she could strike, a man, a fellow diner who had been observing the scene with growing discomfort, rushed forward. He was in his early 50s, dressed in an elegant suit, and carried an air of quiet dignity. Reaching out, he grabbed Mary's arm in an attempt to stop her. "Mississippi, that's enough," he said firmly, his voice filled with urgency and disapproval. But Mary, fueled by her anger and blinded by her prejudice, yanked her arm free with a sharp motion, glaring at him with fiery determination. "Stay out of this," she snapped, her voice shrill and unhinged. "You don't know what you're dealing with." The man faltered for a moment, his grip slipping as Mary broke free. "Please," he implored, his tone softer now, almost pleading. "This isn't right. You can't treat someone like this." But his words fell on deaf ears. Mary turned back to Dwayne, her focus singular and unyielding. "Get out," she spat venomously, her foot poised to strike. The man, despite his good intentions, could do nothing more but stand there, helpless, as the situation spiraled further out of control. Dwayne, still seated, remained calm, his steady gaze meeting Mary's wild eyes without a hint of fear. The entire restaurant watched, breath held, as the scene teetered on the brink of chaos, the room heavy with the weight of what might happen next. "Oh, I see now." Mary's voice cut through the air like a blade, sharp and dripping with venom. She turned her attention to the man in the suit, her eyes narrowing as she took a deliberate step forward. "You're just like him, aren't you? That's why you're so eager to interfere. Sympathy for your own kind. Is that it?" Her words were laced with cruel mockery, designed to provoke. Her lips twisted into a bitter smirk, and her eyes widened, almost wild, as she glared at the man, her disdain palpable. "Do you feel some sort of kinship? Some shared struggle that's making you stand up for him? Or is this just your desperate attempt to feel righteous in a place you clearly don't belong either?" Mary's voice grew louder, her tone taunting as she gestured toward Dwayne, then back to the man. "It all makes sense now. You think you're better than us, stepping in like you're some kind of savior. But let me tell you something, your sympathy, your heroics, mean nothing here. You're just as out of place as he is." Her eyes flashed with something almost manic as she leaned in slightly, her body tense with contempt. It was as if she were feeding off the hostility in the air, adding fuel to the already raging fire. Around the room, diners exchanged shocked glances, some visibly uncomfortable, others stunned into silence. The man in the suit held his ground, his jaw tightening as he faced Mary's verbal assault. But before he could respond, the focus shifted back to Dwayne, who had been quietly observing the entire scene, his calm expression unbroken despite the storm brewing around him. The tension was palpable, and the entire restaurant seemed to be teetering on the edge, waiting for someone to take control of the chaos. "All the same, aren't you?" James snarled, his voice loud and slurred with frustration. He jabbed a finger in the air, first at Dwayne, then at the man in the suit. "That's why you're defending each other, right? A bunch of nobodies sticking together. Pathetic." His face was red, a combination of alcohol and rage, and his words were laced with bitterness. The room grew even quieter, the air heavy with tension as James's anger boiled over. He took an unsteady step closer, his gestures wild and aggressive, his voice rising with every word. "Why don't you just grab hands and get out of here?" he spat, his tone venomous. "Go on, both of you. People like you don't belong here. You're ruining this place just by breathing in it." It was clear James had lost all patience, his drunken bravado now teetering on the edge of outright chaos. His words hung in the air like a slap, shocking some diners into gasps while others averted their eyes, unwilling to meet the unfolding scene. Mary stood nearby, her arms crossed, watching with a smug expression, as though reveling in James's outburst. Dwayne, however, remained seated, his calm presence a stark contrast to the man's unhinged behavior. He glanced briefly at James, his gaze steady and unflinching, then at the man in the suit, who looked equally disgusted by the turn of events. The storm swirled around him, yet he sat firm, his quiet dignity standing in defiance of the hatred being hurled his way. Dwayne finally broke his silence, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the chaos with an authority that commanded attention. "That's enough," he said, his gaze locking onto Mary's. "You're a server, yet you've chosen to behave like this? Do you think you deserve to work in a place like this when you treat people this way?" His tone was steady, devoid of anger, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the room take notice. The quiet dignity in his words stood in stark contrast to the venom that had been spewed moments earlier. For a brief second, even Mary faltered, but the flicker of hesitation was quickly replaced by her usual defiance. She straightened her posture and crossed her arms, her voice rising as she shot back. "Oh, don't give me that lecture. Someone like me serves the elite. People who belong here. People with class, not someone like you." Her words were loud, cutting, and dripping with condescension, as though she wanted to make sure everyone in the restaurant heard her. She gestured sharply toward Dwayne, her lip curling in disdain. "You're not worthy of this place, and I won't let someone like you act like you have any right to be here." The room fell into a stunned silence again, the tension almost unbearable. Diners started, some horrified, others frozen in their seats, unsure how to react. James smirked drunkenly, clearly emboldened by Mary's outburst, while the man in the suit looked on in disbelief, his jaw tightening as though struggling to contain his anger. Dwayne, however, didn't flinch. He leaned back slightly in his chair, his calm, unshakable demeanor unwavering in the face of Mary's hostility. His steady gaze bore into her, unspoken yet powerful, as though silently reminding her of the truth she had chosen to ignore. The silence that followed her words seemed louder than anything else, pressing down on the room as everyone waited for what would happen next. Dwayne leaned forward slightly, his calm but authoritative voice cutting through the suffocating tension in the restaurant. "That's enough," he said, his tone quiet yet commanding, silencing even the whispers of the diners around him. His steady gaze fixed on Mary, unflinching and resolute. "You've crossed a line. You may not realize it now, but you'll have to pay the price for what you've done today. The way you see people, your prejudice will have to change. One way or another, it will." Mary stood frozen for a moment, her indignation flickering behind her narrowed eyes. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, Dwayne reached into his pocket and calmly pulled out his phone. His deliberate actions only added to the gravity of the moment, his every movement measured and confident. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath as he dialed a number, his face unreadable, his composure unshaken. The call connected almost immediately. "Hey," Dwayne said evenly, his voice deep and resonant. "I stopped by the restaurant you mentioned last night. The one you said was yours." He paused, listening to the response on the other end. His expression didn't change, but his next words were sharp and direct. "Yeah, I'm here right now, and I need to let you know. I've had an unacceptable experience." Mary's face paled, her defiant stance faltering as she processed his words. Her confident smirk faded into something closer to panic, though she tried to maintain her composure. Around the room, diners exchanged shocked glances, whispers now growing louder as the gravity of the situation began to dawn on them. Dwayne continued the call, his voice unwavering. "Yes, I think you should come down here. You'll want to see this for yourself. The behavior I've witnessed tonight isn't something that should ever represent your business. It's unacceptable, and frankly, it's disgraceful." His words hung in the air like a judgment, their weight impossible to ignore. Mary took a small step back, her hands trembling slightly at her sides as she tried to process what was happening. Her earlier confidence had crumbled under the quiet power of Dwayne's response. Ending the call with a quiet click, Dwayne placed the phone on the table and looked back at Mary, his steady gaze meeting hers. The silence in the restaurant was deafening, broken only by the faint sound of footsteps as the staff and diners alike tried to process the unfolding drama. "You think your behavior doesn't matter," Dwayne said, his voice low but filled with an unshakable certainty. "But it does. You represent more than yourself here. And the way you've acted tonight reflects not only on you but on the business you work for and the people who trust you to do your job with decency." Mary opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. For the first time that night, she looked genuinely unsure, her earlier arrogance replaced by a growing sense of dread. The diners sat in stunned silence, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on the room. Dwayne remained calm, unshaken, his presence commanding in a way that required no raised voice or aggressive gestures. Everyone knew, without question, that the situation had shifted, and that Mary's actions had set off consequences she wasn't prepared to face. Mary's smug expression crumbled as her phone buzzed in her pocket. Her hands trembled as she pulled it out, the screen lighting up with the name of her manager. Her heart sank. She hesitated for a moment, glancing nervously at Dwayne, who sat silently, his calm demeanor now an unshakable force in the room. Around her, the murmurs of diners filled the air like a rising tide of judgment. She could feel every pair of eyes on her as she reluctantly swiped to answer. "Hello," she said, her voice unsteady, the confidence she had exuded moments earlier completely gone. "Mary," the voice on the other end snapped, sharp and cutting. "What in the world are you doing? I just got off the phone with Mr. Johnson, and I am absolutely appalled. Do you have any idea who he is? What he stands for? What you've done tonight is beyond unprofessional. It's disgraceful." Mary's face went ashen, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. She opened her mouth to speak, but the manager didn't give her the chance. "I'm on my way there right now," the voice continued, icy with controlled anger. "You better pray this situation can be salvaged, or there will be consequences, not just for you, but for this restaurant's reputation. Do you understand me?" Yes, ma'am," Mary stammered, her voice barely audible. She hung up, her hands shaking as she lowered the phone. For the first time that evening, she looked truly afraid, the weight of her actions crashing down on her like a tidal wave. Meanwhile, James, the drunk instigator who had fueled the chaos, was no longer enjoying the show. His earlier bravado had faded as he noticed the shift in the room. The diners were no longer silently observing. They were whispering, pointing, and shooting disapproving looks in his direction. Even the staff, who had hesitated earlier, were now standing at a distance, watching him with barely disguised contempt. James's gaze darted between Mary and Dwayne, his mind racing. He was drunk, but not so far gone that he couldn't see the writing on the wall. The situation had spiraled out of control, and his role in it was becoming increasingly clear to everyone present. His earlier confidence faltered, replaced by the creeping realization that he was in over his head. I think I'll just head out," James mumbled, his voice slurred but nervous. He stumbled backward, his hands raised as if to distance himself from the mess he'd helped create. "This isn't worth it," he muttered under his breath, weaving through the tables as he made a hasty retreat toward the door. The room remained silent, save for the faint whispers of the diners and the sound of James's unsteady footsteps fading into the night. Mary, meanwhile, stood frozen in place, her face pale and her body rigid as she stared at Dwayne. He hadn't moved, hadn't raised his voice, yet the quiet power of his presence had unraveled everything. The fallout had begun, and there was no turning back. As the tension in the room finally began to dissipate, Dwayne turned his attention to the man in the tailored suit who had stepped in earlier, rising slowly from his seat. His towering frame exuded calm authority, yet his expression softened with genuine gratitude. He approached the man, extending a firm hand, his voice steady and warm. "Thank you," Dwayne said, his deep voice carrying a sincerity that resonated with everyone around. "You've shown me what kindness truly looks like in the face of adversity. It's not always easy to step up for someone you don't know, especially in a situation like this." The man, momentarily taken aback by the heartfelt words, clasped Dwayne's hand with a firm grip. His own expression shifted from tense to touched, a flicker of humility crossing his face. "I only did what I felt was right," the man replied modestly, though his voice carried a sense of quiet pride. Dwayne smiled faintly, his gaze steady and filled with respect. "What you did tonight meant more than you might realize," he said. "You stood up when it would have been easier to look away. That's something I won't forget." He paused, releasing the man's hand but still holding his gaze. "I hope all the good you showed me tonight comes back to you tenfold. The world could use more people like you." The man nodded, visibly moved, and said, "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That means a lot." As Dwayne returned to his seat, the room, still buzzing with the echoes of the night's events, seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. The quiet exchange between the two men was a reminder that, even in moments of darkness, kindness and integrity could still shine through. As Dwayne prepared to return to his seat, The man in the tailored suit reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, elegant business card. Stepping forward, he extended it to Dwayne with a warm smile. His earlier stern demeanor softened by the turn of events. "Mr. Johnson," the man said, his tone respectful but friendly. "I'm truly honored to have met you tonight, even under these circumstances. I own a restaurant not far from here. If you ever have the time, I would be delighted to welcome you as my guest. It would mean a great deal to us." Dwayne accepted the card with a gracious nod, his large hand dwarfing the finely printed card. He glanced at it briefly, a sleek black design embossed with the name of the restaurant, its logo gleaming under the soft light. Looking back at the man, Dwayne smiled, his gratitude evident. "Thank you," he said earnestly. "It's not every day you meet someone who's willing to step up and show true character. I'll make sure to stop by and experience what you've built. If it's anything like the integrity you showed tonight, I'm sure it'll be unforgettable." The man chuckled lightly, his humility shining through. "It's just a small place compared to where we are now, but we take pride in treating everyone who walks through our doors with respect and kindness. That's always been our philosophy." Dwayne extended his hand again, this time with a firmer grip, as though solidifying not just his gratitude but the beginning of a connection. "I'll be there," he promised, his voice steady, "and I look forward to seeing the kind of place that comes from a man with values like yours." The man smiled broadly, clearly touched by Dwayne's words. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'll be waiting." The exchange between the two men didn't go unnoticed. In the midst of the chaos that had unfolded earlier, this moment of mutual respect and goodwill stood out like a beacon of hope. The whispers among the diners shifted, the earlier tension giving way to admiration. People exchanged glances, some smiling quietly as they observed the unexpected camaraderie. As Dwayne returned to his seat, he slipped the card into his pocket, a subtle reminder of the connection he had just made. He glanced back at the man, who gave him a nod of encouragement before returning to his own table. There was an unspoken understanding between them, one built not on status or appearances, but on integrity and shared values. From that moment, the seeds of a genuine relationship were planted. The man's simple gesture of handing over his card had created a bridge between two people from seemingly different worlds. And in the days to come, Dwayne would make good on his word, visiting the man's restaurant, where their friendship would deepen over time. It was a reminder that even in moments of confrontation and division, kindness and decency had the power to build something meaningful and lasting. Not long after the tense exchange settled, the restaurant doors opened with a sense of urgency. A woman, sharply dressed in a tailored blazer, strode in. Her expression was composed, but her eyes held a mix of determination and unease. It was the manager, having arrived as quickly as possible after the phone call she had received from Dwayne. She surveyed the room briefly, taking in the hushed atmosphere and the glances from diners who were still reeling from the earlier confrontation. Spotting Dwayne, she made her way toward him with purposeful strides. Her professional demeanor barely concealed the weight of the situation. When she reached his table, she stopped, clasping her hands tightly in front of her. "Mr. Johnson," she began, her voice steady but laced with genuine remorse. "I want to sincerely apologize for the unacceptable experience you've had here tonight. I've been fully informed about the events, and I am deeply embarrassed by the behavior of my staff." Dwayne looked up from his seat, his calm yet commanding presence making it clear he had no intention of brushing aside her apology. He gestured for her to continue, his silence encouraging her to address the matter fully. "I assure you," the manager continued, her tone growing more urgent, "this is not the standard we uphold at this establishment. The actions you were subjected to, particularly from Mary, are inexcusable, effective immediately. She will be removed from her position. Our guests, no matter who they are, should always feel welcome and respected." Mary, who had been lingering in the background, froze at those words, her face turning pale. She opened her mouth to protest, but the manager shot her a sharp look that silenced her before a single word could escape. The manager turned back to Dwayne, her expression softening slightly. "On behalf of the entire team, I would like to make amends for the distress you've endured. Your meal tonight will." Of course, be on the house. And we would like to offer you a personal invitation to return as our guest whenever you wish, with the service and respect you deserve. Dwayne nodded slowly, his gaze steady. I appreciate your apology, he said, his voice calm but firm. But tonight wasn't about a meal or the service. It's about how people are treated. No one should ever have to experience what I did here tonight. The manager nodded, clearly understanding the gravity of his words. You're absolutely right, Mr. Johnson. We will be taking steps to ensure this never happens again. I hope you'll give us a chance to prove that we can do better. Dwayne looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable, before finally offering a small nod. I'll think about it, he replied, his tone measured. For now, let's make sure lessons are learned here by everyone. The manager bowed her head slightly, visibly relieved that Dwayne was willing to accept her apology, at least partially. As she walked away to address the lingering chaos, Dwayne remained seated, his presence still commanding the room. The night had been a test of character, and while the wounds it had left might take time to heal, there was a quiet sense that the ripple effects would lead to meaningful change. Months later, during a break from his busy schedule, Dwayne found himself on a well-deserved vacation. As he planned his itinerary, one name came to mind, the man in the tailored suit who had stood up for him that night in the upscale restaurant. True to his word, Dwayne decided to visit the man's restaurant, curious to see what he had built. The location was modest compared to the opulent establishment he had been in before, but it exuded a charm and warmth that immediately drew Dwayne in. The exterior was quaint yet inviting, with soft string lights framing the entrance and a sign that read the restaurant's name in elegant lettering. As he stepped inside, he was greeted by an atmosphere of genuine comfort. The soft hum of laughter and conversation filled the air, accompanied by the inviting aroma of freshly cooked dishes. A host immediately approached him with a welcoming smile, showing no hint of the judgment or prejudice Dwayne had experienced that infamous night. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here, they said warmly, guiding him to a table by the window. Every detail in the restaurant reflected care and thoughtfulness, from the perfectly arranged decor to the cozy lighting that made every corner feel personal. As he looked through the menu, Dwayne noticed that each dish was named after people or moments that clearly held significance to the owner. It wasn't just food, it was a story. The manager, the same man who had stood by him, soon appeared, his face lighting up when he recognized Dwayne. Mr. Johnson, he greeted, shaking Dwayne's hand firmly. I can't tell you how much it means to see you here. Dwayne smiled, his genuine warmth shining through. I told you I'd visit, and I'm glad I did. This place, it's incredible. Everything about it, how welcoming it feels. The attention to detail, it's clear you've poured your heart into it. The man nodded, visibly touched. That's exactly what we aim for. Everyone who walks through these doors is treated like family. It's something I've believed in from the very beginning. Throughout the evening, Dwayne sampled several dishes, each more impressive than the last. The food wasn't just delicious, it was crafted with passion and authenticity. The staff's hospitality was unmatched, their smiles genuine and their service seamless. It was clear they weren't just employees, they were a part of something meaningful. When the meal ended, Dwayne stood and shook the man's hand once more. You've created something truly special here, he said sincerely. It's not just a restaurant, it's a reflection of who you are. Thank you for letting me experience it. As the evening unfolded and the meal drew to a close, Dwayne leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. The food, the atmosphere, and the impeccable service had left a lasting impression on him. He looked around the room, observing the happy diners and the attentive staff, each interaction a testament to the values the restaurant upheld. The man, noticing Dwayne's contemplative demeanor, approached the table again, a warm smile on his face. Is everything to your liking, Mr. Johnson? He asked, though the pride in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Dwayne smiled and nodded. More than that, this place is special, and it's clear that what you've built here comes from the heart. It's rare to see this level of care and authenticity in every aspect of a business. The man's smile widened. Thank you. That means a lot coming from someone like you. This restaurant has always been about more than just food. It's about creating a place where everyone feels valued. Dwayne leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting to something more serious, yet still warm. I see that, and it's exactly why I want to talk to you about something. Have you ever considered expanding? Taking what you've built here and sharing it on a larger scale? The man blinked, momentarily taken aback. Expanding? I mean, it's always been a dream, but I've never had the resources or the connections to make it happen. Dwayne nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's where I come in. I believe in what you've created here. This isn't just a restaurant. It's a model for how businesses should treat people, with respect and dignity. I think we could build something together, a chain of restaurants that carry this same spirit, this same quality, to cities across the country. The man's eyes widened, his expression shifting from surprise to cautious excitement. You really think that's possible? He asked, his voice laced with both hope and disbelief. Absolutely, Dwayne replied, his tone steady and confident. I've worked in a lot of industries, and I know how to build something meaningful. What you've created here is already the perfect foundation. With the right investment and a solid plan, we could make this dream a reality. The man paused, visibly processing the magnitude of what Dwayne was proposing. He glanced around his restaurant, the place he had poured his heart and soul into, and then back at Dwayne. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his voice full of emotion. This could change everything. Dwayne smiled, his trademark warmth shining through. Think about it. There's no rush, but if you're ready, I'll be here to support you every step of the way. The man nodded, a mixture of gratitude and determination in his expression. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'll give it serious thought, and if we do this, I promise you, I won't let you down. I know you won't, Dwayne replied confidently. As they shook hands, the room seemed to buzz with an unspoken energy, the beginning of something extraordinary taking shape. It wasn't just a business proposition. It was the start of a partnership rooted in shared values and a vision for something greater. Dwayne Johnson and his new business partner set out to build a restaurant chain unlike any other, a place where every customer, regardless of background, would feel valued, respected, and cared for. They envisioned a space where the food was as exceptional as the service, and kindness was at the heart of every interaction. What started as an idea born from a small but extraordinary restaurant quickly grew into a nationwide sea. The restaurants were designed to be warm and inviting, with thoughtful touches that made every guest feel at home. The decor blended modern elegance with subtle nods to the original establishment, creating a sense of continuity and authenticity. Each table was carefully arranged to ensure comfort and intimacy, while the lighting and ambience in Kura, what truly set the chain apart, however, was its approach to service. Employees were carefully selected, not just for their skills but for their character. Every member of the team underwent extensive training, focusing not only on technical excellence but also on empathy, understanding, and respect. The motto of the chain, "Serve with heart," was more than a slogan. It was a way of life. Staff were encouraged to connect with guests, to anticipate their needs, and to go above and beyond to ensure a memorable experience. The menu was crafted with the same level of care. Each dish reflected the passion and expertise of the chefs, with ingredients sourced from sustainable and ethical suppliers. From hearty comfort food to refined culinary creations, the menu offered something for each. In addition to its exceptional service and food, the chain became known for its commitment to giving back to the community. A portion of the proceeds from every meal was donated to local charities, and the restaurants frequently hosted events to support causes like education, hunger relief, and community development. Employees were also encouraged to volunteer. Within just a few years, the chain grew to dozens of locations across the country, earning praise not just for its food but for its unwavering commitment to treating every person, customer, or employee with dignity and care. It wasn't just a business, it was a movement, a shining example of how kindness and excellence could transform not only the dining experience but also the lives of those it touched. Love this content? Like the video and subscribe for more amazing updates. Share your thoughts below. Your support means to us.